Hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. In 1838, the discovery of gold on Cherokee land led to the U.S. government's forced removal of the Cherokee to make way for settlers. The Treaty of New Echota, signed in 1835 by a small Cherokee faction, gave the U.S. government legal grounds for removal, despite widespread opposition. Cherokee leaders like John Ross fought back in court, but their efforts were dismissed by the government. By 1838, the military began rounding up the Cherokee, placing them in internment camps, where disease and hunger spread rapidly. The Cherokee were forced to march from Georgia to Oklahoma, enduring harsh conditions, disease, and death along the way. As they traveled, many Cherokee died from starvation sickness and the brutal winter conditions. The Seminole in Florida resisted removal led by Chief Osceola, but were eventually moved to reservations after a long fight. After months of suffering, the Cherokee reached Oklahoma, but the loss of their homeland left lasting scars on their people. President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act, allowing the U.S. government to relocate Native American tribes from their lands to the west. As settlers pushed westward and cotton farming expanded, pressure mounted on Native American lands, especially Cherokee land in the southeast. A small faction of Cherokee leaders signed the Treaty of New Echota, ceding land to the U.S. government, though most of the tribe rejected it. John Ross and other Cherokee leaders challenged the treaty in court, but their legal efforts were dismissed and the removal process continued. In Georgia, settlers and state leaders pressured for Cherokee removal, while the U.S. government began taking action to enforce relocation. Cherokee leaders continued to resist removal through diplomatic efforts, but their appeals were ignored by the government. General Winfield Scott led the U.S. military in preparing to forcibly remove the Cherokee, rounding them up for relocation. In the summer of 1838, the Cherokee began their forced march from Georgia to the west, enduring harsh conditions. As winter arrived, the Cherokee faced freezing temperatures and inadequate clothing, leading to widespread suffering and death. The Choctaw tribe was the first to be removed under the Indian Removal Act, suffering greatly from disease and exposure on their journey. The Seminole tribe, led by Chief Osceola, resisted removal through guerrilla warfare, delaying their relocation for years. The military faced logistical challenges, including shortages of food and supplies, but enforced the relocation by strict orders. The Creek tribe was forcibly removed in 1836. Many died along the way due to disease and poor conditions. The forced removal separated Cherokee families, with many elderly and children dying during the journey. After months of suffering, the Cherokee arrived in Oklahoma, but the new land was far from ideal, leaving deep emotional scars. The Cherokee struggled to rebuild their society after losing their land, and the journey left lasting damage to their cultural identity. In the summer of 1838, thousands of Cherokee were rounded up and forced into internment camps, waiting for the journey to begin. Disease and poor conditions in the camps took a toll on the people. Under the orders of the U.S. government, the Cherokee were prepared for the long march west. They were told they would leave immediately with little preparation or adequate supplies. The first groups of Cherokee began their journey westward, leaving Georgia and surrounding states, heading toward the land designated for them in Oklahoma. As the Cherokee began their journey, they faced intense summer heat and later the bitter cold of winter. The weather conditions made the march even more unbearable. Food and medical supplies were limited, and the military escort struggled to meet the needs of the Cherokee people. This lack of resources contributed to a high death toll. Cholera, dysentery, and other diseases spread rapidly in the internment camps, claiming the lives of many Cherokee before they even began their journey. The Cherokee were forced to leave their homes, farms, and sacred burial sites. Many had to say goodbye to their ancestral lands without knowing what lay ahead. Once on the march, disease continued to spread among the Cherokee. Many died from cholera and dysentery as they moved across unfamiliar and difficult terrain. The Cherokee were made to walk miles each day, facing extreme exhaustion illness and the overwhelming stress of their forced relocation. Families were often separated during the march. Elders, children, and the sick were left behind or fell behind, resulting in many never being reunited with their families. Cherokee leaders like John Ross attempted to negotiate with military officers to improve conditions, but their pleas went unheard, and the journey continued with little regard for their well-being. While some soldiers were sympathetic to the Cherokee, others treated them harshly, using force when necessary to keep the groups moving, contributing to the suffering. As the Cherokee journeyed west, other tribes like the Choctaw and Chickasaw, who had been removed earlier, greeted them. Their own stories of suffering added to the Cherokee's anxiety and grief. The Cherokee reached the Mississippi River, a significant milestone in their journey. But the river was no relief. Crossing it marked the start of a new set of struggles in the harsh new lands they were forced to inhabit. Upon arriving in Oklahoma, the Cherokee received temporary relief from the grueling journey, but the land they were given was barren and unsuitable for farming. By the time the Cherokee reached their new lands, more than 4,000 had died along the way due to disease, starvation, and exhaustion, leaving behind a trail of grief. In Oklahoma, the Cherokee began to rebuild their lives, but their new land was harsh and their culture had been profoundly disrupted by the forced relocation. In Florida, the Seminole tribe continued to resist relocation. They fought U.S. forces in a series of wars, delaying their forced removal and providing a symbol of native resistance. Like the Cherokee, the Chickasaw endured great suffering on their journey. They were subjected to the same harsh conditions, and many died along the way. As the journey continued, food rations were insufficient and starvation was widespread. Many Cherokee perished because of hunger and lack of nutrition. Cholera and other diseases continued to ravage the Cherokee as they made their way west. Hospitals were overwhelmed, and medical care was practically non-existent. The long march took a psychological toll on the Cherokee people. Many lost hope as they saw their people suffer, and the journey seemed endless. The children of the Cherokee suffered the most as they were unable to endure the physical hardships of the march. Many died or were abandoned during the journey. The forced removal was not only a physical ordeal, but a cultural loss. The Cherokee's spiritual connection to their land was severed, and they were left struggling to adapt to an unfamiliar environment. The Cherokee were forced to march across rugged terrain, enduring harsh weather conditions, and facing a lack of shelter and food. Military escorts drove the Cherokee onward, using force when necessary to keep them moving. The soldiers were often unsympathetic to the suffering of the people. At times, the military escorts struggled to maintain order as the Cherokee were weak from illness and exhaustion. Many fell behind, but there was no mercy shown for the slow. Disease spread quickly through the group, with cholera and dysentery claiming lives every day. The Cherokee had little to no medical care during the journey. Many were forced to leave behind loved ones who were too sick to continue. Families were separated, and some never saw each other again. As the days passed, the Cherokee were given little to eat. Starvation became a real threat, and many died from malnutrition. The winter months brought even harsher conditions, with freezing temperatures causing further suffering. Many Cherokee died from exposure to the cold. The military tried to maintain control of the march, but the constant hardships and suffering took a toll on the morale of both the Cherokee and their guards. The Cherokee were marched in groups, with each group traveling at different paces. Some were given slightly more favorable conditions, but the majority of the tribe suffered equally. The Cherokee were forced to leave their homes, their farmland, and their sacred sites behind, unable to even retrieve personal belongings for their journey. The long march led to a deep sense of despair among the Cherokee. The loss of their ancestral homeland seemed unbearable, and many wondered if they would survive. At times, small skirmishes broke out between the Cherokee and the military, though the Cherokee were too weak to offer any real resistance. The journey was particularly hard on the elderly and the very young. Many elderly members of the tribe could not keep up with the pace and were left behind. As the march continued, the Cherokee faced increasing hostility from settlers who viewed them as obstacles to their own expansion. Tensions with local white settlers added another layer of difficulty. There were reports of Cherokee dying in the middle of the night, too weak to continue the march, leaving their bodies behind in the wilderness. The Cherokee's forced relocation took them through vast, desolate landscapes. The sense of isolation and vulnerability was overwhelming for many. Along the route, some Cherokee tried to escape. But the harsh conditions and the constant threat of military punishment made it nearly impossible for anyone to escape. The military commanders were determined to complete the relocation, but they were often unable to protect the Cherokee from disease, starvation, or attacks from settlers. In the midst of this suffering, some Cherokee kept their spirits alive through songs, stories, and prayers. These acts of cultural resistance provided some comfort. The journey was long, with the Cherokee walking hundreds of miles toward their new homes. Every step was a reminder of what they had lost and the harsh realities they faced. As the days wore on, the Cherokee slowly became accustomed to their new environment, though the emotional scars of the journey lingered. Despite the hardship, the Cherokee maintained their traditions and tried to create a sense of community among the survivors. They established new settlements, but it was a constant struggle. Once in Oklahoma, the Cherokee were placed on land that was unfamiliar and barren, making it difficult for them to sustain themselves. The loss of their fertile homelands left the Cherokee in a constant state of poverty and despair as they tried to adapt to an environment they had never known. The mental toll of the forced march left many Cherokee struggling to cope with the trauma they had endured. Some never recovered from the psychological scars. The journey westward took months, and by the time the Cherokee arrived, they were physically and emotionally broken. Many had lost family members along the way. The trauma of the journey was compounded by the fact that they were forced to live on land that was not suitable for farming, their primary way of life. Despite the suffering, the Cherokee did not give up their fight for sovereignty. They continued to fight for their rights even after the removal was complete. As time passed, the Cherokee began to rebuild their society, but the memories of the Trail of Tears would forever remain part of their history. The forced relocation of the Cherokee is a reminder of the immense human cost of American expansion and the treatment of Native Americans by the U.S. government. The Cherokee's survival and resilience in the face of such hardship became a symbol of strength and resistance for future generations. The legacy of the Trail of Tears remains a powerful reminder of the cruelty and injustice faced by Native Americans during the westward expansion of the United States. Upon arrival in Oklahoma, the Cherokee faced immediate challenges as they tried to survive in unfamiliar land with little support from the government. The land given to the Cherokee in Oklahoma was far from ideal. It was barren, unfit for farming, and lacked the resources necessary for their survival. The harsh winter of 1839 proved deadly for many. Without sufficient shelter, food, or supplies, many more died from exposure, disease, and starvation. The Cherokee suffered from an outbreak of diseases, including cholera and influenza, as the harsh living conditions and lack of medical resources took their toll. Food supplies were scarce, and the government's promises of provisions were often not fulfilled. Many Cherokee were forced to ration what little food they had. The Cherokee struggled to adapt to their new surroundings, as their culture was deeply tied to their ancestral lands, which they had been forced to leave behind. The Cherokee were devastated by the loss of their sacred sites. The forced relocation severed their spiritual connection to their homeland, further deepening their sense of loss. The Cherokee struggled to rebuild their society, as many families were separated, and their social structure was weakened by the journey and the new living conditions. The survivors of the Trail of Tears experienced profound psychological trauma. The loss of loved ones, land, and culture left many in a state of despair. Despite the hardships, the Cherokee worked together to rebuild their community, creating new homes and establishing a semblance of normalcy in the face of adversity. Farming in Oklahoma proved difficult. The land was not as fertile as their original homelands, and many Cherokees struggled to grow enough food to sustain their families. Even after the forced relocation, the Cherokee continued to resist U.S. government policies. They fought for their rights and sovereignty, using legal and political means to assert their presence. The economic conditions in Oklahoma remained poor, and the Cherokee found it difficult to support themselves. Many were dependent on the government for basic needs, but aid was often insufficient. Despite the hardships, the Cherokee made efforts to preserve their language and culture. They established schools, churches, and community organizations to maintain their heritage. In the years following their relocation, the Cherokee had to integrate newcomers, including other displaced tribes, into their community, further complicating their efforts to rebuild. The Cherokee political system adapted to the new circumstances. New leaders emerged, and the tribe began to reorganize in response to the challenges they faced in Oklahoma. The Cherokee worked to formalize their new government, forming the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma, to govern their people and establish their rights. The U.S. military maintained a presence in Oklahoma, overseeing the Cherokee and other tribes. Though the threat of violence had diminished, tensions remained high. Despite the pain of their displacement, the Cherokee clung to their spiritual beliefs. Ceremonies, prayers, and cultural practices helped to preserve their identity and provide comfort. Over time, some Cherokee families were able to reunite, though many were forever separated. The effects of the long journey and forced separation lingered for generations. Cherokee communities began to take shape in Oklahoma. They rebuilt their homes, established farms, and tried to create a new life, though it was never the same as their life before the removal. The Cherokee continued to fight for land rights and the fulfillment of treaties made with the U.S. government. They sought to regain control over their land and maintain their sovereignty. The legacy of the Trail of Tears remained a defining event for the Cherokee. The emotional and physical toll of the journey would never be fully healed, and the trauma would be passed down through generations. The Cherokee adapted to their new life in Oklahoma, continuing to practice their cultural traditions while also navigating the challenges of life in their new home. Their resilience in the face of adversity became a symbol of strength for future generations. The Cherokee faced challenges in rebuilding their society in Oklahoma as they worked to establish their homes in a land far from their ancestral roots. Despite the loss of their land, the Cherokee made efforts to preserve their traditions, including language, arts, and ceremonies that were integral to their cultural identity. With the arrival of new settlers in Oklahoma, the Cherokee began to interact with other tribes, some of whom had also been forcibly relocated, leading to complex new relationships. The U.S. government imposed various policies that restricted Cherokee autonomy, and the tribes struggled to maintain control over their land and resources. As the Cherokee adapted to their new environment, they began rebuilding their agricultural system, but the land was not as fertile as their original homelands, making farming a constant challenge. Many Cherokee sought to regain their sovereignty by organizing politically. They pushed for the restoration of their rights and worked toward securing legal recognition as a nation. The U.S. government's treatment of Native Americans continued to cause tension. The Cherokee's struggle for self-governance persisted, with many leaders like John Ross advocating for their rights. Despite the hardships, the Cherokee persisted in their desire to build a prosperous future for their people in the West. They established schools, churches, and other vital institutions. The Cherokee's adaptation to life in Oklahoma included changes in governance. They created a new political structure, often facing resistance from the U.S. government. As the Cherokee continued to rebuild, they faced the challenge of reestablishing their economic systems. Many turned to agriculture, but the struggle to cultivate the land was ongoing. The forced removal, while physically overleft, an enduring legacy of cultural loss and dislocation. The psychological impact was felt deeply across the generations. The Cherokee worked to preserve their cultural heritage through education. They established schools to teach their children the Cherokee language, history, and values. With their sovereignty in constant jeopardy, the Cherokee continued to resist U.S. encroachments on their land and rights, making legal and diplomatic efforts to preserve their freedom. The creation of the Cherokee National Council marked an important moment in the tribe's political history. They worked to represent the needs of their people and ensure their survival. During this period of rebuilding, some Cherokee were able to start new lives integrating into the emerging communities in Oklahoma, while others struggled with the trauma of their past. The Cherokee Nation's continued efforts to fight for their land rights included legal battles, petitions, and public advocacy for justice and recognition by the U.S. government. The presence of the military in Oklahoma remained a constant reminder of the tribe's displacement. The Cherokee people were forced to navigate this reality while maintaining their dignity and independence. The emergence of new leaders within the Cherokee Nation helped the tribe unite and face the challenges of their new life. Their leadership was crucial in negotiating with the U.S. government. As the years passed, the Cherokee people began to rebuild their cultural institutions, such as their churches, schools, and community centers, ensuring the survival of their identity. The legacy of the Trail of Tears continued to shape the Cherokee's future in Oklahoma. Despite their hardships, they remained resilient and their determination to preserve their culture and sovereignty endured. The legacy of the Trail of Tears remains a deeply ingrained part of Cherokee history, influencing their identity and their continuous fight for sovereignty. Over time, the Cherokee Nation rebuilt, but the memory of the forced removal and the pain it caused was never forgotten by the tribe. The political struggle for Native American rights continued into the 20th century, with the Cherokee remaining at the forefront of efforts to reclaim their sovereignty and land. Legal battles over land rights and federal recognition persisted, with the Cherokee pushing for justice and restitution for the horrors they endured. The suffering endured by the Cherokee people on the Trail of Tears became a symbol of the broader injustices faced by Native Americans during U.S. expansion. The Cherokees' ability to survive and rebuild in Oklahoma, despite the trauma of their forced relocation, became a symbol of resilience for other Native tribes. The history of the Trail of Tears continues to be a source of pride for the Cherokee, who see their survival as proof of their strength and determination. Many Cherokee leaders, past and present, have used the painful history of the Trail of Tears to fuel their advocacy for Native rights and cultural preservation. The memory of the forced removal has been preserved through stories, oral histories, and artwork, keeping the legacy alive for future generations. The suffering of the Cherokee on the Trail of Tears has been acknowledged by both Native communities and the U.S. government. Though reparations remain a contentious issue, as the Cherokee Nation grows and thrives today, the legacy of the Trail of Tears serves as both a painful reminder and a source of strength. The emotional scars of the Trail of Tears are still felt within the Cherokee community, but their ongoing efforts to heal and move forward continue to inspire. The story of the Trail of Tears has been passed down through generations, ensuring that future Cherokee never forget the sacrifices made by their ancestors. The enduring legacy of the Trail of Tears teaches us about the resilience of the Cherokee people and their determination to preserve their culture, land, and sovereignty.